let's go to our second story that again shows how Jeff Sessions feels when it comes to the issue of criminal justice reform. Another lie we heard during this confirmation hearing. The Justice Department, they're looking to upend Obama administration reforms that call for an end to mandatory minimum sentencing for nonviolent drug offenders. Sessions recently appointed hardline federal prosecutor Steve Cook to be his top lieutenant on violent crime. His agenda fulfilled President Trump's promise to stop, quote, the carnage in American cities by reinstating harsh prison sentences for all offenders, though the result has been mass incarceration of low-level offenders who are disproportionately black. Cook, who was the president of the National Association of Assistant U.S. Attorneys, shares the same philosophy as Sessions when it comes to equating the spike in violent crimes in cities such as Chicago with drug usage and trafficking.
Psychologically, politically, morally, we need to say, as Nancy Reagan said, just say no. Don't do it. There's no excuse for this. It's not recreational. It can be destructive, and it consistently is destructive. We will enforce our laws. We'll put bad people behind bars. We will fight the scourge of drug abuse.
Now, Cook steadfastly believes the criminal justice system is not broken, denies there's any racial bias in the system, and says there's no such thing as a nonviolent drug offender. What the hell?
Drug trafficking is inherently violent. Drug traffickers are dealing in a heavy cash business. They can't resolve disputes in court. They resolve the disputes on the street, and they resolve them through violence. In addition to that, they have turfs to protect, they have witnesses to intimidate, and everything they do revolves around violence. And the suggestion that mid-level and high-level drug traffickers are nonviolent is absolutely ridiculous.
And joining us via FaceTime from D.C. to discuss this is Kevin Ring, the president of Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Kevin, you would think that these so-called righteous people, I thought they were evangelicals, I thought they were Christian-loving people. It's as if they paid no attention to numerous Supreme Court justices who have said mandatory minimums make no sense. You would think they have listened to the Koch brothers, or folks like Newt Gingrich, or folks like Grover Norquist, or folks like Reed. I mean, it's like, what world are they living in?
Yeah, they didn't get the memo. We're going back to the 80s, big hair, new Coke. We're going to try a bunch of policies that didn't work. And the worst thing about it is that if you looked at the homicide numbers out of Chicago last month, they've gone back down. So this blip of 2 years where crime increased, and it only increased in some cities, may have been just that, a blip, not what Sessions said, which was this dangerous permanent trend. And so crime, which has been dropping, as you know, for over 20 years, and may continue to drop, and these guys will rush in and take credit even though they've done nothing at all.
And not only that, Kevin, I mean, again, you have numerous Republican governors who have said their states are going broke by continuing to lock people up. You have conservatives who have been leading in many ways on this whole issue of examining criminal justice reform. These idiots just want to just throw folks in jail and go back to the 70s and 80s that got us in the problems we're in now. So how can you talk about family values if you want to keep locking folks up?
I don't think they think about it that way. I really don't. I mean, and understand, they're pretty much outliers. If any other presidential candidate had won, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because Sessions was one of about 20 Republicans who had problems with the sentencing reform, the criminal justice reform bill that was moving through the Senate last year. He was one of the few opponents of that, and he happened to back the right horse. So now he's in this position. But they are outliers, but unfortunately they have a lot of power now.
Well, and not only that, look, we saw President Barack Obama commute a number of sentences freeing individuals. And look, some of the folks were upset by that. But when you look at these numbers, these sheer numbers, it clearly shows we have a problem in this country when it comes to locking folks up and throwing the key away.
No, there's no doubt about it. In fact, that issue you raise actually bothers me a lot, because we've had the pleasure of meeting some of the people who President Obama commuted. These people were serving life sentences because of the 3 strikes and you're outlawed. They've come to our offices. These were guys who are now in their 50s or 40s who were supposed to die in prison. And they were non-violent drug offenders. I'm sorry Steve Cook doesn't think that exists, but they didn't engage in violence. That word has a meaning. And these people were non-violent drug offenders. They were supposed to die in prison. And yet when President Obama did that, Steve Cook was out there criticizing him, saying he's going to let all these, dangerous people back on the streets. It just wasn't so.
All right, Kevin Ring, we still appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, A. Scott Bolden, our panel here, just again, just another example of this Justice Department not caring about people.
Well, there's so much empirical data against the outlier position that Steve Cook represents. It just simply is. And it doesn't stop crime. It's not a crime deterrent. All it does is increase the number of people in prison. And by the way, the private prison system that under Obama was terminated, we need to watch and see whether those contracts come back. But it doesn't solve crime because it doesn't get to the underlying issue in our more challenged communities in rural America and in the inner city, what the basis of a lot of this activity is.
And the other issue here is that you're going to see a rollback of this real progressive push to address mass incarceration, right? That's beginning to make some difference in states. In New York, you recently seen some progressive legislation pass around heroin. And that's primarily because white folks in rural America were being impacted by heroin. And what they said was, you know what, this is really a public health issue.
Exactly.
This is not a criminal justice issue, but we're not saying that for black folks.
And that's the thing. I think that when we have this regressive framing, the tough on crime, law and order, that I don't think people are willing to go back to what these folks are trying to get us back to. I think in the states you have seen strides, even in the reddest states, to figure out we're not going to do this again.
Well, can't wait to see what the white evangelicals have to say. Where are you, Pastor Paula White? Where are you, Pastor James Robinson? All of you who back Trump, let's see if you got something to say. A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not going to let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally.
What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.